Wired.com presents The Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. And here is your host, David Barr Kirtley.
Hello, and welcome to episode 210 of Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. Today on the show, we'll be discussing the Showtime TV series Penny Dreadful, a gothic drama featuring classic characters from Victorian literature such as Dracula, Dorian Gray, and Dr. Frankenstein. The show recently concluded its third and final season, and this will involve spoilers for all three seasons, so just be aware of that. And I'm joined by three guests. So first up, we've got Theresa DeLucci, making her sixth appearance on the show. She's written about Hannibal and Twin Peaks for Boing Boing, and she's also a frequent guest on Den of Geeks' You Still Know Nothing Game of Thrones podcast. Her article 5 Reasons to Watch Penny Dreadful recently appeared on Tor.com. So Theresa, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me back.
Then next up, we've got Christie Yant, who you may remember from our panel on Douglas Adams back in episode 42, and our panel on Women Destroy Science Fiction back in episode 112. She's the assistant editor of Lightspeed magazine, and a writer and editor for the independent comics publisher Chimera Press. Her short fiction appears in books such as The Year's Best Science Fiction and Fantasy, and in magazines such as Analog and Science Fiction World. So Christy, welcome to the show.
Hey Dave, glad to be back.
And also joining us today is Angela Watercutter, who you may remember from our panel on Jupiter Ascending back in episode 138. She's a writer and editor for Wired, where she writes about music, TV, and movies, but mostly movies. She's also the main person behind the scenes who helps get our posts up on Wired.com each week, and you should also go check out her recent articles, Penny Dreadful Might Be Blood-Drenched But It Ain't Horror, and 5 books you must read to truly get this season of Penny Dreadful. So Angela, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, and so let's start off with Theresa. So Theresa, around this time last year, we were getting ready for our Hannibal panel when it was announced that Hannibal had been canceled. And then this week, just as we were getting ready for our Penny Dreadful panel, it was announced that Penny Dreadful had been canceled. So I can't help feeling like it's a bit of a curse or something. But so why don't you just tell us...
you should stop watching shows.
Or at least stop doing panels about them, right? But yes, why don't you just tell us a little bit about overall, what's your reaction to this news that Penny Dreadful has been canceled?
Oh, horribly shocked and disappointed. I mean, at least with Hannibal, I think the showrunners really knew that it was coming and had planned for it more. I know John Logan, the creator of Penny Dreadful, says this was always his design to have it end the way it did, but it really did not come across that way in the last 2 episodes. It felt very rushed. And I'm just bummed because Penny Dreadful became my favorite show since Hannibal, and where am I going to get my dark, sexy, blood-drenched, smart drama now?
How about Christy? What are your feelings about this turn of events?
Oh, I second all of that. I was so dismayed. I couldn't believe it. There are so many threads that they kicked off in even season 1 that they never even remotely came back to, and I have so many questions unanswered. And yeah, I feel the same way. Like the last 2 episodes were so disappointing to me. I was not at all happy with the way it wrapped up. And I'm hoping against hope that some other network picks it up and that they get to move on. But I don't know. The way they ended it, who knows if they even can.
Yeah, and so you're not buying this idea that this was the plan all along?
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. There are too many questions unanswered.
Yeah. How about Angela? What do you think about all this?
Yeah, I mean, I would co-sign everything that everybody else said. I mean, I appreciated like the fact that it was sort of dreamed up as a kind of 3-season arc, and that like TV now never really has this ending. It either like gets canceled or kind of keeps meandering every time it gets renewed, and we end up with a lot of these sort of unanswered questions or whatever. Like I appreciated that they set out with this sort of arc in mind, but at the same time, to everybody else's point, like it didn't actually end anything, you know what I mean? It just sort of kind of stopped happening. There was no real resolution for me when I saw it. And after I saw that ending, I thought, well, I guess that's one way to do it, but then maybe they could just reboot the show, with a whole other series of these sort of gothic tales, like you could have Penny Dreadful and have it be kind of a more serialized thing, but then they announced that it had just been canceled outright. And so I was like, well, I guess we don't even have that dream anymore. Like that was the big disappointment, I think, for me, was it wasn't that they were just ending this, 3-season arc, but that they were kind of ending the concept, which I found to be quite disappointing.
Right, and I know that you've been covering Penny Dreadful a little bit for Wired. Do you have any behind-the-scenes insight, or do you know anything about the production or the people involved that might shed any light on this?
Well, I mean, I interviewed John Logan about the 3rd season before it had started. And, he had mentioned in that conversation that, even before they had launched season 1, like when he was pitching the show, that it was going to be, he had envisioned a 3-season sort of run that ended with this kind of confrontation, where Dracula shows up. And, when he said that, he was like, no, don't get me wrong, I would love to have season 4 and 5. But like, I look back on it now and I was like, maybe that was always kind of, lip service, or just like, you don't want to, kind of show your cards too early in that regard. So, I mean, maybe this always was the plan, and this was always what was going to happen. I mean, he's now working on the script for the next Alien movie, like he has other things kind of going on, like perhaps this is just, sort of the way it was always meant to be, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, I've been watching interviews with him all day, and he mentioned any number of times what he would, that he had ideas for season 4 and 5 and plans and things like that. So, yeah, it just adds to Teresa's point that I don't know. It just doesn't seem like this was the plan all along to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it adds a certain weird expectation if they went into the 3rd season press and all of the advertisements being like the final season, the final showdown. And I don't know if that would have helped or hindered. I think maybe he felt that it would hinder it, to have people feel like, oh, bummer, it's the last season. Like, well, I guess I won't start watching it now. But they could have done it in a way with like the final showdown between, Vanessa and Dracula, like play that up a little bit. It could go both ways. So I could kind of see why he wouldn't want to have everyone know it was the final season. I feel with Hannibal, it was always such an on the bubble show and always at risk of getting canceled, that I think Brian Fuller always ended every season like it could be the last, because he felt like it genuinely could.
Did you guys have any sense that this show might get canceled because of the ratings? I mean, how has the show been doing in the ratings, and was it not a surprise because of that?
The season 3 premiere was definitely a lot lower than the season 2 premiere and the season 2 finale. So viewership was going down, and that does kind of tend to happen with most TV shows. But I guess even on cable, there's a certain level of expectation of viewership that I don't think the show was getting. And, just culturally, people talking about it. I didn't know many people who watched Penny Dreadful. It was nice to finally, meet people. And I felt like I just started meeting people this year who were like, oh yeah, I love Penny Dreadful. It's so great. Why is everyone talking about Game of Thrones? Or why is it airing the same time as Game of Thrones? That's ridiculous.
Right.
Yes, that was a mistake.
There's literally everything is on Sunday night now. Like, you could put something on Thursday or Monday. It'd be nice. Outlander airs on Saturdays. It's not in any danger. People watch TV differently now.
Yeah, I was going to say, if I didn't have everything TiVo'd, I don't know which of those 2 shows I would pick. I mean, they are my 2 favorite. Well, no, I would pick Penny Dreadful. My husband would pick Game of Thrones, and then it would be fisticuffs every Sunday, Just seems like a tragic error. And like you, I feel like I hadn't been hearing anybody talk about it either. And it sounds like you 2 have done some incredibly scholarly sort of like outreach to the people on this subject. And I just wrote my first newsletter on Penny Dreadful 2 weeks ago, encouraging people to see it right before they announced that they were canceling it. And I'm like, why didn't I start doing this sooner? Why wasn't I, talking it up and letting people know? But again, not everybody has a TiVo. So if it came down to Game of Thrones versus Penny Dreadful, I don't know what would have happened.
Well, see, I blame myself, because if we had done this panel a year ago, probably millions of people would have watched the show, and that might have saved it.
All right, well, we're going to blame you too then, Dave.
Yeah.
All right, well, Angela, you said in one of your articles that you wrote, you describe yourself as the resident Penny Dreadful evangelist. Could you talk a little bit about what your experiences have been as a...
Yeah, I mean, the long and short of it was that, like, even back in season 1, I was sort of, ringing the bell in the halls, like, why aren't more people watching this show? Like, essentially because, like, you want to have at least one person to have that water cooler conversation with when you come in on Monday. And so I slowly kind of brought a few people around to my cause, but not nearly the numbers. And I mean, it's sort of to that point of what we were talking about earlier, like, it was up against Game of Thrones. Come in Monday morning into the Wired office and everybody just wants to talk about Game of Thrones, which is fine. I want to too, but I'm like, guys, you're already watching Game of Thrones. You're already watching Veep. You're already watching Silicon Valley. Add on an extra hour. Watch Penny Dreadful. I need somebody to talk to about this. But so yeah, I was the one kind of championing it from the beginning, because it is that, like I wrote in my piece, there is that thing of, like, it didn't really always have a genre. I feel like people who liked maybe horror or fantasy or certain sort of kind of Baroque storytelling and whatnot weren't really sure if it was for them, and it kind of took a while to get people's attention and make them realize, like, there was kind of something for everybody on that show, and so I kind of had to keep poking at it as much as possible to get other folks in the office to watch along.
I mean, Teresa, did you have any experience trying to get other people to watch this show?
I did. It took me a while to watch the show too. I wasn't watching from season 1. I would see the ads everywhere and be like, well, it looks interesting, possibly cheesy. I didn't have Showtime at the time, but now my parents do. So there are other means of watching it. But yeah, I was not interested in watching it at first. And also because Sunday was so crowded. I'm like, when am I going to find time? But once I finally did watch the first season, I was blown away. So then, yeah, it became a matter of going to all my horror-loving friends, particularly women, being like, no, you have to watch this show. Give it a chance. You'll love it. Dorian Gray sleeps with everybody. It's crazy. You're going to love it. And they did. And now this week, they've all been really mad that I've got them watching another show that yet again got canceled.
Shaky fist.
Yeah.
Well, when you say that particularly women, why do you think that this show appeals particularly to women?
Vanessa Ives. Well, I'd say it's about 70% Vanessa Ives, 30% Lily or Brona Croft.
Yeah.
Incredible performances. Like, my number one reason would be Eva Green as Vanessa Ives. I wasn't very familiar with her outside of Casino Royale and The Dreamers, like her early work with Lars von Trier's. I was blown away by how physical her performance was, with such a, limitation of being like this presentation of a Victorian woman in a very rigid society. And here's this woman who is fighting for her soul. And it came across as so real and sympathetic and truly frightening, especially, particular scenes in the first season with Madame Kali and the seance. I'm like, where is her Emmy?
Yeah.
And then once we get into the whole Bride of Frankenstein thing, like, that's obviously like incredibly tied into like women with agency. And it's smart. It's really smartly done. When Sansa Stark was disappointing me, her storyline was such a bummer last year. I was like, well, at least there's Lily. Lily's giving me everything I want.
And there was such a great thing with those two characters. I mean, particularly Vanessa Ives. I think that, like, because of the subject matter, going into this, everybody thought it was like going to be basically the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, but except maybe it was, but they kind of took out the gentleman part. I mean, it was all these great stories, from Dracula to Frankenstein to Picture of Dorian Gray, but the center of them this time was female. So, it was like that was sort of the twist that got put on all these things. And I think that kind of made all those stories that you had heard before so much more interesting and new and vibrant,
Even the supporting cast is full of women, right? And they took the Dr. Seward, I can't even say the name, Seward character, the Dr. Seward character.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, who was male in the books. Cast a woman who, Patti LuPone, I think is how you say it. She was fantastic in both roles. In season 2, the Joan Clayton story arc had me. I mean, I just had this total feminist meltdown at the end of that arc. I wept for like 2 hours. I don't know. I felt like every injustice ever perpetrated against women was kind of contained in this one arc in season 2 between Vanessa and the John Clayton character. And that there's something, they've done a lot in bringing, even though it's still a male-dominated cast. I haven't actually done the numbers on this. I don't know whether they reached parity. I don't think they did, because the primary cast is still mostly male, apart from Vanessa and Lily/Brona.
Yeah.
But they went far in bringing in villains who are women and supporting characters who are women, and it's so refreshing.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, Teresa, because you mentioned that Hannibal was your favorite show, and then this became your favorite show, and I really see a lot of similarities between this and Hannibal, just in terms of the sumptuousness of it is the best word I can think to describe it.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect word for it.
And I didn't know anything about John Logan at all, but just from watching the show, I felt fairly confident he was a gay man, and I watched some interviews with him today, and he is, and that didn't surprise me at all. And the Brian Fuller, who did Hannibal, is also a gay man, and I just wonder if there's something about that sensibility that comes through very clearly in both of these shows.
Yeah, I think Logan and Fuller both. I think they're so empathetic towards outsiders. And I think that's something that Will Graham, Hannibal Lecter, Vanessa Ives, Lily, Dorian, they're all lonely, estranged characters. But then adding this element of over-the-top theatrics to it, really is what pushes it over, like this visual style as well, to get across loneliness. And it's really a show about outsiders, people who don't fit in. And they come up with found families and murder husbands and, wolf guardians, things like that, it really is relatable. It's a warped kind of family, but they're all families on their show.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned to Angela, you had this article, Penny Dreadful might be blood-drenched, but it ain't horror.
Yeah.
And you said a little bit about this earlier, but I just wonder if you could expand on that. Like, in what sense is this not horror?
I mean, I think it's horror because it has bloody scenes, but I don't think that its purpose is not to scare you. I mean, I think it is Gothic romance, right? It is this idea that, it's dark and twisted and, kind of works on you in that way, but it's not meant to frighten in the traditional sense that I think horror does. And, like the, Gothic romantic novels of, like the 18th century, it really just sort of brought through this idea of the sort of romance and darkness and romance that's involved in kind of living on the other side. And so there was just a lot of that I think came through in Penny Dreadful that, bookworms really probably appreciated. And that's, it was such an interesting thing and wonderful thing to see on the screen.
Right. Well, say a little bit more about that, because you wrote this article too about the literary influences on Penny Dreadful.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the basic texts I think have been, Frankenstein, obviously, Picture of Dorian Gray, Dracula. And then this season they brought in just a touch of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Actually, I'd be curious what the panel thought too about, like, because we talked about the sort of unanswered questions. I felt like they kind of brought that in this season and then didn't do a whole lot with it. But there was, that was another one of the influences. And then when I interviewed John Logan, I had asked him about the book Carmilla, which is a little more obscure, but is this sort of lesbian vampire tale from, I think, 1872. And, he was sort of surprised when I brought that up because it was, it's a little bit more obscure of an influence, but, that was something that he felt very strongly about when he was doing the whole, Lily storyline this year, because she brought in Justine, that woman that, her and Dorian found at the very beginning of the season, I think maybe in episode 2. And she kind of became an acolyte of Lily's, and they sort of formed this intense female friendship that, became the heart and soul of the show, and that was one of the things that that Logan had kind of extrapolated from Carmilla. So yeah, I think those have been the main ones. There are other sort of literary influences throughout the 3 seasons, but those have been I think the biggest ones.
Well, I agree with you with the Dr. Jekyll story is one of the things where it's very, very difficult to believe that was what they had in mind to wrap it up like that. And I actually saw in an interview that he had said that he originally had wanted the character to be Dr. Moreau on the island of Dr. Moreau, but they couldn't get the rights to that. So they ended up going with Dr. Jekyll instead.
Well, and I thought Dr. Jekyll, if anything, with the way season 3 ended, if they did sort of want to reboot it, like post the Dracula arc for the 4th season, that would have been where it would have gone. Like that, it seemed like that was maybe an intentionally unanswered question. And so I was surprised, again, when it was announced that it was canceled, I thought sure if it was going to continue that would be sort of the window into the next sort of segment, of the show.
Yeah. I mean, so Christy, what did you think of these literary influences? Were you familiar with them, or what did you think of how they were used?
I was, and I was familiar with them, and it's what drew me to the show to begin with. And this was one of those things where as soon as I learned that it existed, it just warmed my gothy little heart. I was all over this thing. I had to go back and look at some details, I had to figure out who Mina was, for instance. I had to look that up because I couldn't remember. It had been too long. But I knew, and then when they bring in Harker when she gets married later on, it was like, oh, okay, yep, now that all makes sense. So it felt like for someone who hasn't read these things in a long time and, is not a scholar of them per se, but certainly my tastes and influences have, come from that sort of place. I did feel like there were a lot of like Easter eggs for me to find throughout, and that was cool for me just going through the entire 3 seasons. Jekyll in particular, I thought I was really excited about him as an addition, and I really felt that maybe they were going to go in a direction of redeeming themselves for a very particular sin that they had committed in seasons 1 and 2, and that is by the sin of killing off every minority character that they have. I was really hoping that Dr. Jekyll was going to get a longer run, and that maybe they'd start to correct that, because that was something that really did bother me about the show.
Yeah, I guess we'll talk about the season 2 finale, which is sort of where I started feeling like the show went off the rails a little bit for me, because I really liked the character of Sembene. I thought he was really underused throughout the whole show. And then, when he dies in that episode, I was kind of like, did they seriously just have the black guy die first?
Yeah.
And Angelique. Angelique also.
Yep.
And it was like, well, you did something right, guys. You put them in, but then you killed them off. No.
Yeah, and I think I found the season 2 finale particularly irksome because it just seemed completely illogical to me that Sir Malcolm would go into just charge by himself into the witch castle, and then that Vanessa Ives would do the same thing shortly thereafter. And so then to have such a bizarre, nonsensical course of action lead to the death of this character I really liked, I found very frustrating.
And to sacrifice himself so that the white person would live.
Yeah.
That really, I had a moment there where I was like, guys, I don't know.
Right. This is a trope, right?
Yeah. Oh, it's a trope. Yeah, I know.
I mean, that's what you want to say to them, though. You're like,
right. Oh, right. Yeah. And how do they not know that? How do they not know? I think Hollywood and Burbank, I guess, are still trying to catch up to a lot of the things that we have learned in prose fiction, and comics and literature. I guess we're sort of not willing to perpetrate those tropes anymore, but it seems like they're still catching up. So
Sir Malcolm makes me all kinds of uncomfortable when it comes to things like that, particularly in the beginning of this season, because I liked, I believe his name was Sembene. I think it was pronounced like that. And as soon as they show him baking the cake and everything, you're like, oh man, that's it. They're giving him a backstory. It's coming. I know what's going to happen in the finale. And then to open up season 3 with Sir Malcolm in Africa bemoaning, like, oh, where did everybody go? They're all slaves in the diamond mine. And like, who helped contribute to that? You're terrible. And now you're complaining about it. And like, there's no new places to explore. Oh, let me go to America with, oh, now I've got a new person of color as my sidekick who is also kind of really uncomfortable, like this trope, this
Right.
noble native spirit, Katane, and I wanted to love him so much because I love Wes Studi. He's a fantastic actor, but the character of Katane never got out of that mystical, noble Native American spirit guide, skinwalker, you are all Apache now. It was just very stilted and just so odd. It really did not make me like Sir Malcolm very much at all. And then they show, then we meet Dr. Jekyll, who I think did have a very nuanced, sympathetic backstory, by making him a person of mixed race and what it did to his mother, how he was outcast in both countries. I thought they handled that very well. So it's like two extremes in the same show and in the same season.
Right. And Christy, you mentioned the Angelique character as well. Do you want to say anything more about that character?
Yeah, I was so thrilled that she was there. It made me so happy that you don't often see trans people in mainstream, television, with some notable exceptions, of course. But I loved her character. I loved her relationship with Dorian. I thought that was going to go somewhere. I was really excited to keep her around. And then, once again, they killed her off. And I have to ask, how did you guys not know that wasn't okay?
Right. And even aside from it being problematic in that way, just from a plot standpoint, it seemed very strange to me that character's story didn't seem to have been developed the way that I was expecting it to be or thought it should be.
Yeah, it seemed thin, and it seemed I don't know what their intention was, obviously, but I just felt like that could have gone so far, and it didn't.
Well, it was like she was such an interesting character to introduce because, like, I think what happens with a lot of period shows, it's like, well, you get very sort of, white heteronormative cast because they could just be like, well, that's how it was then, and it's like they kind of did the right thing, by introducing these characters, but then, like you said, they killed them off, and it's like, but why did you do that? I mean, especially with Angelique. Well, actually, it could have been for any of the folks I think that we've been talking about, but like there was a different version of that story where like Angelique and Dorian's storyline came to an end, but then, she just went somewhere else. Like she didn't, there didn't have to be that, it didn't have to fall into that trope of, of killing off that character,
What did you guys make of Lily's, deranged feminist revolution storyline?
I think Gamergaters loved her. No.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, that's one of the things that I loved about the show the most, just how like madcap, kind of over the top, like, oh my God, let's listen to the Bride of Frankenstein have a fantastic monologue about female agency. You know, I am on a lot of podcasts about Game of Thrones and other shows, and I feel like I'm kind of brought in to talk about the feminist perspective or how the women are handled. And I think Penny Dreadful is like legit, like out in the open more than most any other show that's been on TV in a long time about female agency and women and fear of women in power. So I could talk about this stuff and not be like, oh, you're just seeing stuff that isn't there or stuff, why are you always calling out like the feminist things? It's so obvious in Penny Dreadful. I mean, Lily said it all, by when she spoke to Victor and the creature about like, you think you know me, like you don't know anything about me. You created me, you gave me no choice, but I'm aware and this is what I'm going to do and you're all going to kneel before me. I thought it was brilliant because, when people usually think of the Bride of Frankenstein, she hisses and screams. She doesn't ever get to speak for herself.
Right, and I thought her monologue, when she's, beseeching Victor for her freedom at the end, was incredibly powerful and very, very well done.
Yes. Yeah, I think I legit had like a little tear roll down when she's like begging, please don't take her, like my daughter, away from me by wiping out my memory. I thought that was heartbreaking. Ugh.
There was also that great moment earlier in the season where she was sitting outside. The actress's name is Jessica. I can't think of her actual name now. Or Justine, when they were sitting outside that cafe and they see the suffragettes walking by and she kind of, Justine asked Lily, do you agree with them? And she's like, no, our enemies are the same, but they seek equality. And Justine's like, well, what are we after? And she's like, well, mastery. There's that moment of being like, no. Like it's such that over the top thing that, that she sort of played, I think, so well at a couple of key moments this season.
Well, getting back then to the literary influences, because speaking of The Bride of Frankenstein and Frankenstein's monster, I think most people who haven't read the novel think of the creature as being the Boris Karloff kind of moaning, shambling giant, and not like the Shelley quoting soulful creature from the novel. And so I really liked that they actually brought the creature from the novel into this TV show, which I think is a lot more interesting.
Agreed. I wasn't a huge fan of him for the first 2 seasons. First I really was mad when he killed like the second experiment guy.
No, but that was amazing. Oh my God.
Oh, that was quite an entrance. That was amazing. But it's like, no, Mr. Prometheus or whoever, you were so nice.
Proteus, yeah.
And then, oh my God, like what happened?
I thought that was brilliant, Teresa. That was probably my favorite moment of the first season, because he's, Dr. Frankenstein has created this Proteus, creature who just seems like perfectly nice, and you're like, wait, this isn't the story. What's going on here? And then when the original monster just rips him in half, it's like, oh, now I see what's going on here. Oh,
yeah, that was amazing. Poor Proteus. But yeah, that was absolutely incredible. Definitely one of the best moments of the first season, where the show really subverted and surprised. Season 2, I was kind of like, shut up, you're really whiny and entitled. You're not owed love. Nobody is owed love just by mere existing. Shut up, monster. Go away. But this last season, I liked him more when he was starting to recover some memories and he was visiting his family. I thought that was really poignant and done really nicely. And I loved him in Antarctica too. Seeing how they literally walked him out of that situation with the stranded ship and the dying people. And it was really well done.
Oh, that seems kind of weird to me, because I felt like at the end of season 2, he's sailing off to the Arctic, and I was expecting that to really be a major part of the story. And then it was kind of like, screw this. Let's go back to London. It's more interesting there.
Yeah, it was a nice nod to the novel, which opens with Frankenstein pursuing his monster across the Antarctic. The Arctic? The Antarctic?
I think it's the Arctic, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, snow, ice, cold, desolation.
Beyond the wall.
Yeah, beyond the wall, exactly. So it was nice to get that nod. I felt like that was one of those Easter eggs, right? Like, unless you've actually read it, you wouldn't know that was a thing. But yeah, it was short. They brought him back to London where he needed to be, because that's where the action was. But I looked at it as a cool Easter egg.
Angela, do you have any other sort of favorite moments from seasons 1 and 2?
I did really enjoy when Vanessa kind of confronted the witches and, the whole like, know your master moment. I feel like, like that, that did kind of, that was the stand up and cheer moment, I think from that season for me. But, as much as with the way she was dealt with ultimately was not great, I loved everything that Angelique was in. I think that was mostly in season 2. And, there were just so many so many great moments. I think when they play ping pong, I think at one point.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is fantastic. I don't even know if this has anything to do with the plot, but I'm like, I just love that these two characters are, having a date and going to play ping pong now. So there was many of those sort of great moments like that.
I think one of my favorite surprises from season 1 in particular, I really kind of shamefully had not a very high opinion of Josh Hartnett as an actor. I hadn't seen him in very much. I mean, I liked him in Sin City for the 10 minutes he was in it. Could not name many other movies he was in.
The Faculty?
He really blew me away.
The Faculty?
That was so long ago, I don't remember it. So yeah, he kind of blew me away with his performance too. I'm like, wow, I'm really liking Josh Hartnett in this. Like, he's not the poor man's Ethan Hawke. He's really quite something in this. And, they were so heavily hinting that he was the Wolf Man. It didn't, I think I was a little slow on the draw on that one. I didn't quite get it. Didn't get that was coming until when it did, and you're like, oh, shit, he's the Wolf Man, duh.
Wait, how are they heavily hinting? I could see how they were hinting it, but I don't see how they were heavily hinting it.
Well, I mean, with all the massacres and someone's responsible. I don't know. I just felt like when I watched it the second time, I was like, oh yeah, there were little clues here, with his blackouts and just hints that yes, there's something else going on here. He's got another personality. I thought maybe he was like Jack the Ripper. So then when he was the Wolf Man, you were really surprised.
Yeah, the only hint really in retrospect to that was that there's the scene where he confronts these 3 wolves in one of the really early episodes, and then they kind of leave him alone. Yeah,
and then after that it was these murders happening around London, and something that seemed supernatural was involved with it, and I was like, he's the only one we don't know all that much about. He doesn't, he's a stranger here, definitely in London. There's no one else to back up any of his stories. He's kind of a question mark. So I don't know. I was very surprised when he turned out to be the Wolf Man. But then in retrospect, I was like, yeah, I could see it.
See, Christy, do you have any other favorite moments you want to mention?
Yeah, and Ethan actually is at the center of it. I was skeptical about him too at the beginning, and he won me over. He definitely won me over, largely because of the relationship with Brona, which is one of my great frustrations, which I hope we'll get back to in a moment. But my favorite moment in, I guess that was season 1, was Ethan exorcising the demon out of nowhere. We just rewatched it, and chills again, and I didn't see it coming, and I'm so frustrated that we never found out why he was able to do that.
Right.
When did he join the priesthood? At no point are we, is this explained to us? So, but I found that that was just a thrilling moment after everything that Vanessa has been through, to have him, he's been hanging back this whole time, and it turns out that, he has this fundamental power that is complementary to her, I don't know if you would call it power, but affliction, we'll call it. And I was hoping that was going to go somewhere. I was waiting for us to find out where in his background this came from, and how. I mean, they kept calling him the Wolf of God, but is that just because he was a wolf man, or was there more to it than that? Did he get this power by becoming a werewolf, or was there something more? Because it felt to me like there was some sort of religious undercurrent going on there that had to do with something more than just however he became a werewolf. I don't know. Maybe everyone else got it and I didn't. But
no, I completely agree with you, Christy, that all the stuff with the prophecies and the Wolf of God and, Lucifer never really gelled for me in season 3. And so I guess that leads into some of my frustrations with the series finale. Where, I mean, this may be one of those things that just as a non-religious person, this resonates for religious people in a way that it doesn't for me. But the ending just fell completely flat for me. And I've heard John Logan talk about how, he sees this as the character's arc to lose her faith in season 2 and then get it back in season 3. Just fell completely flat for me. I don't know how you guys felt about it.
Yeah, I was super disappointed in the ending. Not so bad a series finale that I can never go back and rewatch the series. Not like, Lost or the last season of Battlestar Galactica or Dexter, where like I wanted to set fire to everything about Dexter's finale. But it was like so flat and rushed. And yeah, I thought the ending with her seeing the Lord, and I see the Lord, and it did make a little sense in a way, like, because that's what her big doubt was, that, God would never find her again, and she was so lost in the darkness. Like, I get it on one level, but they could have made it more epic and more dramatic, and it just felt way too rushed. She was separate from Ethan for so long, and then to have the Wolf of God protect her, and then he shoots her. You don't have to be anything special to shoot Vanessa. Like, that was so lame. Like, what? Really? That's it? Just a nice, tasteful little bullet in her side to make her all dramatic and pale, pretty corpse. It was so lame. Boo.
Yeah, and the end with a kiss or whatever that line is, I was like, really? Like, it turned Twilight in like 30 seconds or less all of a sudden, there was like, it got a little too mushy, I think, for me at the end.
Yeah, I'm rolling my eyes just at the recollection. Yeah, I have nothing good to say about the finale, and we just watched it last night, so no. And we sat there. Oh yeah, we sat there just kind of going, "What just happened? Really?
We didn't even get to see her hanging with Dracula. Like, we saw her in like her cool black dress for like 5 minutes. I'm like, what the hell were you doing with Dracula? Where did this miasma come from? And can we get like a little more with that? Like, Dracula was nothing. Dracula's like, yeah, I'm just gonna hang on the front porch and play cards, and while she's over in the back room like staring at a brick wall or something. Yeah, what?
Well, right, and both in season 3, both Vanessa and Ethan have scenes where they embrace the darkness that I just found comprehensively unpersuasive. They just didn't seem at all like what those characters would do in any way, shape, or form.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, until you mentioned it a moment ago, I had forgotten that Ethan and Vanessa had been lovers. And because I'm still wondering what the hell happens to Ethan and Brona. How did they never, ever, ever see each other again?
I know.
How did that arc never come back around? Because that was the compelling one to me. I didn't understand why we were the Ethan and Vanessa thing actually never. Yeah, I just zero sparks, zero chemistry as far as I can tell. But Ethan and Brona / Lily, they're running in the same circles, but they never see each other again. He never finds out what happened to the person that he was so desperately in love with all that time.
Yeah, I mean, this, like, the Ethan Brona thing was like, yeah, it's inconceivable that we never get any closure on that. Like, even more than we never see Dr. Jekyll Hulk out. Like, oh my God, all season, you've got quite a temper there, mister. Oh, you better watch yourself, you'll lose control. And then nothing, like, oh, okay, peace out, bye. I really thought they were going in a whole different direction with that. When they first met, I was like, oh, there's more to Victor than we know. Like, I don't know, maybe it's me, like, just being, like, too literal about it, but when Jekyll's getting all close up to Victor and they're talking about how they experimented in college, I was like, oh, this is an interesting angle on Victor and Dr. Jekyll. I could go for this. This is interesting. And then that never happened either. And he never even helped out. I was like,
yeah.
What are you doing? Like, it got canceled too soon.
Yep.
I thought by the end, like, the creature and Lily, like, they were all going to bring everybody, like, the whole band back together for the finale. No, like, the creature and Lily just, like, walk off. Dorian's, like, standing in a room for eternity. you know, it was just like, but then weirdly everyone's in Bedlam in the basement and like, oh, hey, Victor, sup, come with us. You know, while we go fight Dracula for this woman you vaguely remember from a year ago, maybe. It was just so odd.
Well, I mean, speaking of how this should have ended, I liked this listener comment from Agnes Denny. She says what she would have liked to see is the Catriona character saves Vanessa and they ride off together.
I like that.
Can we talk about her for a moment? What was that? Like, again, you cannot tell me that this was supposed to be the final season. You just introduced her, and I don't know who she is. I looked her up. She doesn't seem to be any kind of canon character. Insights?
I mean, I thought she had such a great introduction, and like the couple interactions that she had with Vanessa in those 2 episodes where they were really clicking. I was like, this is going somewhere. I support this 100%. And then she just sort of like came and killed a couple vampires in the end, and then we never know what happens to her after that. You know, she was like this really awesome, you know, superwoman, and then she was just gone. I was like, wait, but I liked her. Where did she go? You know, bring her back. She was great.
I kind of hated her. I thought she was like the Poochie of Penny Dreadful. I did like her introduction. You know, I was like, oh, this, you know, researcher into death, and I liked her with Vanessa. But the more she hung out, and it's like, oh, she's great at everything. She was such a, like that Mary Sue kind of character, I guess, where she learns all these languages, and she fights karate, and she wears pants and has short hair, and, you know, she doesn't feel any of like the loneliness and isolation that Vanessa does. I mean, I guess we didn't get to know her very well. And then she's showing up in the finale, and Ethan and Sir Malcolm are all kind of like making eyes at her. Like, especially Sir Malcolm. It's just like, ugh, gross, dude.
Stay away
like,
from
no,
her,
you should
Sir
be
Malcolm.
looking at Dr. Seward. Like, be age appropriate. Yeah, it just felt like they were trying so hard. You know, like, look at this cool character. It reminded me of Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunter. Like, that kind of thing. Like, too anachronistic for me. Was not feeling it. And I did read something saying they did think about doing a spin-off with Catriona and Sir Malcolm, perhaps, but I wouldn't have watched it for very long.
Yeah, I agree with you that she didn't seem to fit the milieu as well as the other characters to me. I thought she was cool. I think if they had introduced her abilities and character over a much longer span of episodes, I think it would have worked better for me. But yeah, just how suddenly she comes and does all this stuff. It was another thing that just felt kind of rushed and weird toward the end of the show.
I felt like since Ethan and Sir Malcolm were away, they needed to introduce a character by Vanessa who could be like in physical fights, like physically protect Vanessa, because Vanessa wasn't a fighter like that. I'm like, Vanessa has her own powers. Like, she doesn't need like a ninja fencer lady.
I'm kind of struck that, you know, I think Teresa and Christy both said this was their favorite show on TV, I think, if I got that right. And then, Angela, you said that you were evangelizing for it and stuff, but then like it sounds like you guys have really mixed feelings about the show by the end. Do you just want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, every show, you know, no matter what, I'm never going to be 100% satisfied with anything, you know. But I felt like it spoke to my sensibilities, my creative sensibilities, I guess. Again, warmed my gothy little heart. You know, all of the nods to Gothic literature, and again, they did so many things right. You know, they really did. And it was really only in the last 2 or 3 episodes that they lost me. And I think that was not their fault. I think they got canceled, and whatever they say, it wasn't their fault. You know, this was not supposed. You know, this was not supposed to end right now. You cannot convince me that this was supposed to end right now. But yeah, I mean, of course, that they're. I think as writers and creators, we're always looking for the things that we can improve perhaps in our own work and in the entertainment we consume. And so, yeah, if I'm critical of things like killing off Angelique, that's why, because I would like to see it done better. That doesn't mean I didn't love the show, and it doesn't mean I didn't love her. I did. That's why I was upset. Again, still my favorite show. Now it's gone, and I don't know what's going to replace it.
Yeah, I have no idea what could fill like the Penny Dreadful shaped hole in my heart, which was still healing from Hannibal. Like Christy, I was also, teenage goth, like still, inside, still goth, still covered in eyeliner. What I loved about this, Penny Dreadful and Orphan Black both had license agreements with Hot Topic, so you could buy like scorpion tops and like little cheapy knockoff corset kind of things and bustles at Hot Topic, and teenage me would have gone berserk for this. I'm like, what a perfect thing between that and Orphan Black. How good is that, to be a teen right now loving this kind of stuff. You could love something and have problems with it. I've been reviewing Game of Thrones for like 6 years now, and there's things I love about it, and there's things I will take them to task heavily for. They're not mutually exclusive.
I mean, Angela, do you want to add anything to that?
Oh no, I mean, I just I feel like anytime a show ends, there's always like that bittersweet period where it was never going to live up to what you wanted it to be, and especially with something like this where the end was a pseudo surprise, I feel like there's always just that sense of dread, pardon the pun. So like I think that's just where I'm at with it. I will never not, have loved what 3/4, 5/8, whatever of this show. And the fact that it kind of ended on more of a whimper than I wanted it to doesn't smear the entire show for me. So it's still going to be one of my favorite shows. I am definitely going to also have that that Penny Dreadful sized hole in my heart for a while, which is probably what Penny Dreadful would have wanted for me. So I guess in that regard it ended as it should have. But yeah, it's like I said, it's a letdown. But I will take many memories. What was the line? Think of me only when you dance, and then it's like, well, I shall have to dance more often. I will dance more often now.
Well, I mean, we mentioned that the ratings for this were never what they kind of needed to be. Do you think that was inevitable for this show, that it couldn't have been more popular just given its nature, or do you think that they could have tweaked some things that would have made it appeal to a larger audience without losing what you guys liked about it?
That's a tough question, because it had all of that, Penny Dreadful itself, like even like what it's named after, has all that lowest common denominator carrots, like tits and gore, everybody likes that, well, most people like that. I think in their entertainment, it's an easy hook to be like, oh, look, cable, murder, sex, hard R rating. But to make it more accessible, I don't know, maybe people were turned off by the historical nature of it, like the period piece and the literary aspect of it. Maybe people are burned out from Game of Thrones or an Outlander. There's all these other historical kind of shows on, and this one was so different. I really, I think if anyone could figure out what would have made them be more popular, there'd be a lot more great television show on.
Yeah, I think that there were so many things that were, I don't know if they were specific to a certain kind of audience, but, when we talk about the Easter eggs for people who have, read, say, Dracula or Picture of Dorian Gray or something like that, there are those things where it's like, if it didn't catch on, it would catch on with that core audience. And if it didn't catch on beyond that after a certain point, like maybe it just never would have. And if it would have tried to appeal more broadly than all of this sort of, original fans who came for those, those little Easter eggs and those things that kind of said, I like that thing you like, then it maybe would have lost its core fan base in the process. So, it's a very tough question to answer, I think.
Well, Angela, in one of your articles, you quote John Logan. Somebody says to him, "The show is just too hyper-literate," and he says, "Thank you, I agree."
Yeah, yeah, that's that. I think if you tell him his show is bookish, it's probably the biggest compliment you could ever possibly give him. I think he also said something about to the effect of his show will probably somewhere hold a record for the most long phrases of poetry ever recited on a television show. Like that. He's gotten away with reciting more, Wordsworth than, any showrunner in the history of cable. But that's sort of a specific thing I think that appeals to a certain set of us who wore eyeliner in high school. Or at least, excessively black eyeliner in high school.
Yeah, I think it's literate, it's dark, and I think the grotesquerie of it is really a turnoff to a lot of people. I think that when you get, just even the opening sequence with there's dissection going on, and I think that that appeals to people who like Hannibal. It's a real turnoff to people who don't. So, and it would, I think it would have lost its heart if it didn't have those very specific kind of notes to it, and it's what drew me to the show, right? I love the dark and the grotesque. I love the demons and the reanimations and the resurrectionists and I'm into all of that. Not everybody is. Most of my local friends are not. I would not be able to get any of them to watch that show. But where we kind of intellectually and creatively live, we can find our kind on the internet quite easily. But I don't know that we necessarily are reflective of the population at large. So.
Right, because I would say that when in the first season, this show is very deliberately paced, and I would say when I first started watching it, I really liked that, and it felt very artistic and serious in a way that most television doesn't to me. But then by season 3, I felt like some of the scenes were so long. I was just kind of like, oh, get on with it. And I don't know. I do wonder if they had just tightened up the pacing a little bit, if that might have cast a wider net as far as potential fans.
It might have prevented some attrition for sure. I don't know. I don't know about getting more later, but I don't know. I agree. I think there were some sort of slogging things that were happening in season 2 and 3. But I think that would be more of a matter of losing people than not gaining them at that point. Because it seems like it would be hard to jump into, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I feel that way a lot about most TV nowadays. I think the way people view TV is starting to change because they could binge it on demand whenever they want, Like I said, I didn't get into Penny Dreadful until after the first season had aired, and then I spent a really awesome weekend just watching it for hours on end and enjoying it, but I couldn't imagine going into it in season 2 fresh. It's, we don't watch TV like that anymore. You can always go back and find it on Netflix, find it on demand, streaming on Amazon. So I don't think people expect to come into a second season. Or a third season new. So yeah, I think it presents a challenge for showrunners with how are they going to grow an audience by word of mouth if they're not getting enough people to actually watch it. Because I think a lot of critics like the show. I don't think they liked it as much as they liked Hannibal. And Hannibal had an even more active fan base on social media. Penny Dreadful, I really can't say that much about it. I don't know many people who even have Showtime in general, which is going to be really weird for the new Twin Peaks series.
Yeah.
I guess, and then one other thing I wonder if, might have killed off this show is how expensive it is to produce. I mentioned the sumptuousness of it. You just look at it and it just looks like it cost a lot of money to make. One scene that jumped out at me in particular is there's the big dance ball in Dorian Gray's mansion where then all the costumes get soaked in blood. And I was like, oh my God, how much did it cost to have all those costumes and all that fake blood and everything? I don't know. I just couldn't believe the scale of that scene.
Yeah, no, it had to have been I mean, I don't know what the cost benefit analysis is for something like that, but I hear what you're saying. That could have been something that was, definitely when you look at a balance sheet, like, well, is this, like giving us what we want here,
All right, cool. So we're pretty much out of time now. So I guess any final thoughts on Penny Dreadful? Teresa, final thoughts? Anything else you want to say about Penny Dreadful?
Yeah, I still will look forward to watching episodes again. It will always hold a special place in my heart, but I think I'll come up with my own alternate kind of headcanons after season 2, when we see Vanessa becoming a master of her inner dark and her soul. So I'll just kind of try to imagine my own story, and also where Victor and Dr. Jekyll are murder husbands of a different sort.
Oh, wait, actually, I forgot to mention something. So the Angelique character was played by an actor named Johnny Beauchamp. And my girlfriend Stephanie was actually good friends with him growing up, and they used to pretend to be witches together.
No way! Oh, that's amazing.
So jealous.
And so when I met her, she mentioned, she's like, oh, there was this guy, Johnny Beauchamp, I was friends with, and he moved to another school or something, and we lost track of him. And I tried to like Google him. We tried to find him, and we couldn't find what had happened to him. And then it just turned out that he had been bullied so badly that he had decided to just leave school and go to become an actor. And so then he just like showed up. He was in the Stonewall movie, and there was something else he was in too. And yeah, so it was it was pretty interesting to have him show up in this thing that we were watching.
Well, that makes me extra mad about Angelique.
Yeah. Likewise. Well, may success be the best revenge for him.
Yes.
All right, but getting back to our final thoughts. So, Christy, any final thoughts on Penny Dreadful?
Yes, someone please, please, please bring it back. I feel like I'm having a Firefly moment, guys. This is really not okay. And I guess if no one's going to, then I'm going to go write some Rona and Ethan fanfic.
Right.
I think I smell an anthology brewing. Continue on your favorite shows in thinly veiled fan fiction.
I like it. I'll see what I can do.
And then Angela, final thoughts?
I mean, I would say, if nothing else, please find another home for Eva Green on cable. Like, I just need her to be in something that I get to watch every week. It doesn't have to be all season, like all year long. I mean, it can be, a 10 or 12 episode arc, but I feel like she's like one of my actresses that's like always great. And I'm always so happy to see her, but I never see her enough. So like, please get her another HBO show or Cinemax show or Showtime, something. Like I just, if we can't get Penny Dreadful back, at least get me Eva Green back. The letter writing campaign starts now. That's all I'll say about that.
Yeah, I wanted to mention, I mean, man, no one plays possessed like Eva Green.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
She's absolutely terrifying.
Her eyes go gaunt, and they're like, there's something expressive about her face and her bone structure that just, she can relay that so well without even thinking about it. And yeah, it's incredible.
The way she drops her voice.
Yeah.
Oh, and you could just tell, her whole body language changes completely. It's so impressive.
Yeah.
All right, so someone make a show about someone who's possessed. We gotta
starring Eva Green.
Starring
Eva Green, yeah. All right, great. So I think we're gonna wrap things up there. So we've been speaking with Theresa DeLucci, Christie Yant, and Angela Watercutter. So guys, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for letting me join the coven.
And that was our panel. So big thanks again to Theresa DeLucci, Christie Yant, and Angela Watercutter for joining us on the show. Big thanks as well to Stuart Barnes, Sora Kin, Andreas Belmont, and Alec, who all just signed up this week to support us on Patreon. Geek's Guide to the Galaxy is made possible thanks to support from listeners like you. So if you enjoy the show and want it to continue, please sign up to give us $1 or $2 per episode over at patreon.com/geeks. And if you'd rather make a one-time or fixed monthly contribution, you can do that via PayPal over at geeksguideshow.com/crowdfunding. So big thanks again to everyone who's contributed. We really appreciate it. All right, so that was our show. So thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.
The Geek's Guide to the Galaxy is a production of Wired.com. For more information about the show, visit geeksguideshow.com. To learn more about your host, visit davidbarrkirtley.com. Music and voiceover produced by yours truly, Jack Kincaid. If you enjoyed this program, tell your friends. If you didn't enjoy it, tell no one. Thank you for listening.